This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Our guest in this edition is retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc. He's a veteran of Operation Desert Storm and served 10 tours in Afghanistan. He's received 5 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts for his service to our nation. And General Bolduc, it's a great pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and my best to your viewers and listeners.
Thank you very much, sir. We're going to be talking about your more than 3.5 decades of service to our country, and we're also going to get your thoughts on some of the developments that we've seen very recently in Afghanistan, because after your 10 tours there, your views on that are very important to us. But let's start at the very beginning. Where were you born and raised, sir?
So I was born in Laconia, New Hampshire. I was raised in Laconia, New Hampshire. I learned my work ethic on our family farm, dairy farm, cattle, produce, maple syrup, pigs, chickens, turkeys, the whole 9 yards. It was a great opportunity to learn how to work hard and never quit. So I'm grateful to have had that opportunity.
And you were telling me a little bit earlier, sir, there's quite a history of military service in your family and instilled by your family a couple generations back, correct?
That's correct. My great-grandfather and my grandfather came down from Canada and settled in New Hampshire, bought a farm that was built in 1779, and been in the Bolduc family ever since. He had 13 children, and he had a requirement for his 13 children and his over 200 grandchildren, I guess, large number, that you will serve this great country. And he encouraged all Bolducs to serve, but made it a requirement for the Bolduc boys, and didn't care what service, didn't care if it was active duty, National Guard, or reserve, but you will serve if you want to remain in the good graces of my grandfather. And certainly that's not a man you want to test. When
did you join the service, sir, and why did you choose the Army?
Well, I joined in 29 June 1981, right out of high school as a private. I joined the Army because my dad was in the Army and most of my uncles were in the Army, and it just seemed like the service of choice by the Bolduc family. Now, not to say we've had some that served in the Air Force and the Navy and the Marine Corps, but predominantly it was the Army.
Sir, talk about when the opportunity to be part of Special Forces arose and why you decided to take advantage of that.
Yeah, so I was, did my enlisted time, went to the rank of sergeant, then I joined ROTC, and from ROTC, I got my commission, 1988, or that's what it was, 21 May 1988, and then as a first lieutenant, I joined, put in for Special Forces. Now, I'll tell you where the hook was at. That hook was in 1968 when I watched John Wayne's The Green Berets, right? And me and my younger brother, AJ, John as he goes by, were sitting there. We were dressed up in our Army uniform. My Uncle Don was in Vietnam, and I was watching the movie with my grandfather, and that was the hook, right? Seeing John Wayne and, watching Special Forces. And then when I got an opportunity to apply, I did, and, went to selection, passed selection, and went to 5th Special Forces Group as my first assignment as a Green Beret.
And then 2 years after that, 1990, of course, Iraq invades Kuwait. There's Operation Desert Shield and then Desert Storm. You're a veteran of that operation. Explain what your unit was assigned to do and what your role was within that assignment.
Sure. We were up in northern Iraq. We came in from Salopi, Turkey, to help the Kurds who were organizing against Saddam Hussein. And so we helped them. We helped with humanitarian assistance. We brought in food. We brought in water. We helped them with medical care and, anything else that they might require. It was a great opportunity, again, to do special forces type missions. Aside from going on patrols and going to meetings and, coordinating things and calling in, aircraft, helicopters, it was interesting because Turkey and Syria, and Iraq, they don't like the Kurds, and so the Turks were attacking, even though we came through Turkey, an ally. They still were attacking the Kurds, right? So it got pretty interesting. Hell, I was at the bottom of the food chain doing my job, but I'm sure that gets pretty sporty I know it gets pretty sporty up at the political and strategic levels.
So were you instructed to deal with that in any way?
We just took cover and reported, what we saw, and let the chain of command at higher levels deal with it.
Well, let's move along in your distinguished career, about a decade, in fact, to 9/11, 2001. Where were you when you found out about the attacks, and how did you react to it?
Well, I was in 2nd Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. We were getting ready to do one of the largest training exercises that CENTCOM had done in its history up to that point. Jordan and 5 other Arab countries coming together to do joint exercise of all kinds, live fire, jumping on airplanes, doing all the high speed stuff, right? So it was good to see us, be able to plan this, particularly a battalion being able to do this and building around my battalion commander, all of the joint mechanisms and the combined mechanisms that need to come in to play. And of course, that experience helped me out on the ground in Afghanistan as well. But of all the exercises that were planned during that time frame, this was the only one that was executed because King Abdullah requested that from President Bush. And so we did that, but instead of a 45-day mission, it was a 30-day mission. And from there, we got our warning order to go to Uzbekistan. Now, the interesting thing there is my company, Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion, along with 3 other ODAs, Special Forces teams, we were given the mission to train Uzbeks and Tajiks and Kyrgyz, right, in 2000 to 2001. And we did that, and we developed a great relationship with the embassies there. We get a great relationship with the host nation folks, right, and a great relationship with the men that we were training. So when we needed staging bases to go into Afghanistan, those are the countries that stood up to help us. You never know when you're dealing with other countries and you're doing stuff in other countries, what in the future is going to pop up, that building those strong relationships is going to help you, right? And that's why engagement all over the world is hugely important for our military, because those relationships can prove vital for our national security and for future military strategy. So that was good. And so we went to Uzbekistan, staging base to go into Afghanistan. From there to Jacobabad, get on some MH-53 helicopters flown by the Air Force, and then flown into Tarankout, Afghanistan in the south. Now, the big picture, teams up in the north in Marjar Sharif, everyone's seen the movie 12 Strong, right? And then in Kunduz, my brother was over in Kunduz at this time. He was a team sergeant, a master sergeant. Out in a little further out was, you had Kabul and Bagram, right? So we had all of that up in the north and in the east. And then down south, we were with Karzai, and out in the west, we had a team as well. And that was hugely important because all of that had to be stitched up. You had to get Herat, you had to get MES, Kunduz, Kabul, Bagram, and then the most important part, the religious center of gravity in Kandahar, right? And we got there beginning in November. By December 8th, we were demanding the unconditional surrender of the Taliban there. They tried to get some concessions and make a deal, and we said, no deals. Unconditional surrender. We'll meet you at Mullah Omar's headquarters, and you will give your surrender to Hamid Karzai. And that's exactly what happened.
You mentioned the training exercises you were focused on in Jordan. Just a few weeks later, you find yourself going from Uzbekistan into Afghanistan. How much of a learning curve was it there to figure out who your friends were, who your foes were, and how people just operate there?
Well, let me tell you, nobody knew anything about Afghanistan, right? I mean, we had no real reason to focus on it. And so we were able to get our hands on some of the books, Bear Over the Mountain, which was written by, some Soviet generals and others. So we studied that, but we really learned most of what we needed to be successful on the ground from our Afghan partners. And it's just a matter of being humble and respectful and working through with and by them. And when you do that, you get what you need. They clearly needed from us our advice and our assistance. And really what turned the tide was the combination of special forces teams on the ground and our air power, where we were able to use our close air support to be able to break up, strong points that the Taliban and Al Qaeda had put in place. We did that, and we used it very strategically. We never dropped one bomb unless Hamid Karzai approved it. And I think that's an important thing for everybody to know. We weren't just there willy-nilly blowing anything up in our path or destroying everything in our path, because it's so counterproductive at the end of the day, because you're going to have to go turn around and fix it, right? Once you blow it up and it's no longer a war zone, and you're trying to transition into something else like better governance and support for the populace. So we were very conscious about that, and we did it very deliberately. And Karzai was very good, and he was the one that brought in all the tribal elders and village elders. Figure this. We start out with 10 people up in Tarankout, and we end up with nearly 2,000 by the time we get down to Kandahar, because they switch sides, right? There's no way to take prisoners of war, and it wasn't that kind of conflict where you could designate people as prisoners of war, and our government at the higher levels hadn't done much thought. And okay, what are we going to call these guys when we capture them, right? Well, for the Taliban, it was easy. They were Afghans, and the other Afghans said, "Hey, this is my brother. He's switching sides. He's now on our side." End of discussion. Now, Al Qaeda, now on the other hand, they were Arabs, and there wasn't much love for them by the Afghans. So we had to protect them once we captured them, because they wanted to get their hands on them because of the atrocities that they had committed while there particularly in the South with Osama bin Laden, right? And Mullah Omar. We got all these guys coming in, right? And my battalion commander, he's like, he's a great guy, Dave Fox. And he was like, "Wow, are you sure we can trust these guys?" And I said, "Sir, I don't know, but we don't have a choice. It's how they roll." And so we did that, and we would designate and put some of the people that we saw in leadership positions. I had one guy we called Sergeant Major, and he ran everything. He could speak pretty decent English, and we were equipping them with weapons. We were training them on the weapons. We were employing them to fight. We were doing all that stuff. We were bringing in food. We were, Karzai's working the plan with the tribal elders and the village elders. I called it mud hut diplomacy. He's also on the phone with the Bonn conference, talking about what's next, and then he's on the phone with Wolf Blitzer and Dan Rather and the rest of them calling in to try and get some information. It was really amazing, and he handled it quite well. I think he was very appreciative of the fact that we were humble and respectful, and worked with him. But we had this one guy, I remember him to this day. We called him Elvis because the only words he knew in English was "thank you very much." And so no matter what you said to him or did with him, he'd say, "Thank you very much." And so he got the nickname Elvis. And we had the guy that, ran the show. We called him Sergeant Major, right? And it was challenging, but it was what we were trained to do. And it was an honor to be able to serve. And it was certainly very much an honor to free people from the oppression that they were under. And ultimately, that's special forces motto is Deo presso liber, to free the oppressed. And they were oppressed. By the definition, they were oppressed. That was a sad thing to see what had happened to the women and children and men that didn't comply with the Taliban.
General, let's pause right there. We'll be back with much more of your distinguished service in Afghanistan and your thoughts on what we've seen here lately, right here on Veterans Chronicles. This is Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos, honored to be joined today by retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc. We've been talking about his service in Afghanistan, and before that, Desert Storm. He served 10 tours in Afghanistan. We've just talked about the surrender of the Taliban in Kandahar in late 2001. And General, as part of your discussion, you mentioned 12 Strong. That's a story of you and other special forces that became known as horse soldiers. So tell me about that. How did that tactic come about? Was it just simply a matter of the easiest way to navigate the terrain there?
Well, there was a combination of ways to navigate the terrain in Afghanistan, and horse and Toyota Corolla and Toyota pickup trucks and donkeys and the big jingle trucks. We called them jingle trucks because they would decorate them with colors and chains, and when they moved, they jingled, right? So we named them jingle trucks. And boy, they would pack these things with so much stuff. It was just amazing to watch it go down these very, very unimproved roads. You know, Afghanistan is just one big L-shaped ambush as far as I'm concerned. And the Taliban, Al-Qaeda are very good at ambushes. That's the terrain just lends itself to that. And in some cases, the use of the horses were just more practical in some areas than they were with others. And yes, the Horse Soldier movie focuses on the team up in the north, but it was designed to represent all of us that were there in that initial invasion that get that name Horse Soldiers. But it's important to know, what a lot of people don't know, is we used horses in Afghanistan up through 2011. So a lot of people don't know that we still used horses to patrol in and to get close to what we thought were Taliban, Al-Qaeda safe havens. You can hear trucks, you can see trucks, you can hear the helicopters, aircraft coming in. A colonel got rid of them in 2011, which I thought was a bad idea, because when I left in 2011 and I came back a year later in 2012, and I said, "Where are the horses?" And they said, "Well, the previous commander got rid of the horses." And I was like, "Oh, that's a bad call." Because the horses, you get up in them trails in the mountainous areas, various places, and those horses are really good to have. I just want to make that footnote because a lot of people don't know. Out there in Afghanistan, you have to have a family of vehicles, right? And the horse and the donkey are included. We used to, at various times, we would use donkeys to help us with infiltration, but most importantly, we used it to bring ballot boxes into remote areas and then bring the ballot boxes back out, right? So that people in Afghanistan could vote all over the country, regardless of where they were, right? And so, well, it's just something that we did. We tightened up our tradecraft in that area after the first rotation. We realized we needed to know how to hotwire vehicles. We needed to know how to pack mules. We needed to know how to ride horses. We needed some basic mechanics, right, to fix vehicles on the fly, right? Because you're out there in the middle of nowhere. And when you're surrounded by the populace and the enemy, your ingenuity will keep you alive, but more importantly, additional skills will keep you alive. So all these things we learned right as we went, and heck, it was we created, satellite communications on the move in the first rotation, and a requirement for that for subsequent rotations. What we did was we took our antenna and we would put one person there to hold it in a certain azimuth as we moved so that we could communicate while we were moving, hence the word SATCOM on the move. So a combat development requirement came out of that, and lo and behold, subsequent rotations, we had the antenna magnets that went on top of the cars, and we had the intent on the move, so you didn't have to dedicate a person either in the back of the pickup truck or hanging out the side of the window or whatever, so you could maintain constant communications while you were moving.
General, let's skip ahead just a few years and then maybe back up a little bit after this question. But in 2006, you were involved in Operation Medusa, which was a NATO operation aimed at the Taliban near Kandahar. Explain that mission and your role in it.
Okay, so how we got into that position was, back about June of 2002, there was many of us that said, hey, our military mission here is done. Let Karzai, let the governors handle this. The international community's role should be giving them the money that they need to keep the government going, humanitarian assistance, stuff like that. But let's not go crazy here and do a bunch of nation building and create an army. And it's just not the way they fight. It wouldn't be productive. Well, decision was made to do the opposite, and we did just that. And then in 2003, we invaded Iraq, and a lot of resources were pulled out of Afghanistan. And as a result, there was no way to keep our finger on the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, so they resurged. And by 2005, boom, there they were. Huge insurgency, very effective, very determined. And from 2005 to 9 and 10, that's exactly what we dealt with. And in 2010, our casualties were the highest they ever were. So you can imagine. We knew in 2005 that the National Army and the national military, at least, couldn't do their job. They couldn't fight the Taliban on their own without significant help from us. That was true in 2005. It was true in 2013. It was true in 2019. It's true in 2021. That did not change. And I make that point because one of the big assumptions on how we did this withdrawal was based off of faulty assumptions that the senior levels knew better, right? But they...
Not the first time, you're saying.
Right. So anyways, get back to Medusa. This is important to note that we did the transition to NATO. And my good friend, Major General Dave Fraser from Canada, was the RC South commander. And they came there because they were sold a bill of goods that we didn't agree with in 2005 on my first rotation as a battalion commander, coming back in 2006 for my second rotation as battalion commander of the Desert Eagles, 1st Battalion, 3rd Group. And we're faced with this huge insurgency. He's faced with this huge insurgency, and he's got no combat power except for us, right? So he came to me, called me in his office, and he said, Don, can you help me out here? I mean, NATO can't fail the first time we make contact with this enemy out in Panjwai. And I said, well, sir, yeah, I can help you. Let me get with my guys and we'll come back here in short order and brief you a plan. So that's what we did. And Charlie Company, 3rd Battalion, got the mission. We went down into the Reg Desert, which is the Red Desert, and we did a long overland infiltration coming up in the underside of Panjwai from the desert, an infill that they would never expect. They expected us to come from Kandahar City, 25 kilometers, where they could see us, or maybe around the front, but nobody expected us to come from the Reg Desert. Nobody. And everybody thought we were crazy for even, proposing it, but we did it. And our guys did it. And they were freaking amazing, right? I mean, the amount of things that we had to do to pull vehicles out of the sand and vehicles that get stuck and so on and so forth, we still maintain the element of surprise. And when we came up from the south into Panjwai, we completely surprised the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and we completely wiped them out. And this was a stronghold that ended up, in our assessment, it was a IED manufacturing. It was a training location. It was a place that they were holding that gave them entrance into the Helmand province, the Kandahar province, up north into the Zabul province. Hey, you know what I'm saying? Key location. Panjwai has always been a key location. So we took it from them. And then they tried to mass on us and get it back. Well, we were up on the high ground, and I'm telling you, I'm standing up there on 11 September 2006, and it was a shooting gallery, right? There were just so many of them, and they attacked us in bunches and they died in bunches. I think they learned a lesson not to mass after that because they changed their tactics. But that's the kind of insurgency that we were dealing with, and we were using the wrong tactics because we were doing this bottom-up stuff. We're trying, or top down, and we're trying to tell them, no, the way to defeat them is the bottom up by arming the villagers and training the villagers to do that kind of stuff. But we continued with that broken strategy, large military operations, clearing and sweeping. Not good at all, until Stanley McChrystal came in 2009 and said, we're going different strategy, bottom up. And we created what was called the Village Stability Operations, the Afghan local police. And that was a winner. Not perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it beat the Taliban Al-Qaeda at their own game. And it was very similar to what we did in the first rotation. And we created this Afghan local police, small special operation teams out in key villages and districts. By the middle of 2013, we had it. We had 90% of Afghanistan rural area under the Afghan government control.
General, we're going to take one more break here. This is Veterans Chronicles. We're speaking with retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc and his 10 tours in Afghanistan. We'll talk about the rest of his career in service to our country and his reaction to recent events in Afghanistan in just a moment. You are listening to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. I'm honored to be joined today by retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc, veteran of Operation Desert Storm and of the war in Afghanistan, Operation Enduring Freedom, where he served 10 tours in Special Forces. And General Bolduc, I mentioned at the very beginning, you received 5 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts during your service to our country. Tell us a little bit about some of the actions that you were part of that ended up with those honors.
Sure. Well, numerous firefights from the beginning. We got hit by a 2,000-pound bomb, friendly fire, and on 5 December 2001, which, my actions there in setting up, reestablishing security, recovering our wounded and dead, and making sure everybody got out and not leaving anybody behind, and helping our Afghan partners who were hurt at that time and not leaving them behind. Really those Bronze Stars are just, I received those because of the hard work the guys did, right? You don't get those awards without being surrounded by great people that work very, very hard, right? I'm privileged to do that. I lost 72 guys in 10 tours, right? And they stick with me all the time, right? And I use it as my why. I'll never do anything in my life that would discredit them. And if I fall short or fail at something, I just remember the full measure of what they gave and the sacrifice that their families do, and I just keep moving forward. So, I have that, and my wife, who's wonderful, been married for 32 years, and my family, of course, that's my why too, right?
Sure.
But this is a different kind of, a different kind of motivation for a different reason. 2013, the middle of 2013 was a pretty difficult time for us in Afghanistan when the Obama administration wanted to change strategy and pull us out of the villages, terminate that mission prematurely, and go to non-combat operations and top down. And despite the fact that I put together some assessments and, tried to convince them otherwise, didn't work. And I was told that I should have kept my mouth shut, and it wasn't, my place to open my mouth. But, here I am, a colonel, promotable. I got my 1-star command, and I have obligations to people that made sacrifices. And I have obligations to the Afghans that made sacrifices. And the fact that we're going to throw this all away because we could see, could be wrong, but we could, we kind of assess what could happen. Taliban resurgence, Al-Qaeda resurgence, increase in casualties, loss of the security in the rural areas. And that's exactly what happened by 2016, because they made that decision to change. They changed in 2014. after Mullah Omar and many others said, we can't beat them with this strategy. What do? We change strategy and give them a strategy they can win with. And they can get that power base that they need in order to be able to influence things. And this was the Obama administration, right, that did this. And I guess I was a little too loud, because instead of going back to Afghanistan to command at the 2-star level, I was sent to United States AFRICOM, where I began 4 years working as the operations officer for AFRICOM and then the Special Operations Command Africa commander. But, by 2019 in Afghanistan, we had the highest casualty rates. Al-Qaeda and the Taliban owned 90% of the rural area, and ISIS joined the fight. So it got worse. And, I agreed with President Trump's approach to get out of there, conditions-based withdrawal. But although I agreed with getting out of there, I didn't agree with getting out of there this way. I ended my career on 29 June 2017 when I changed command, and I did a retirement ceremony, but I didn't actually retire until 2 October 2017.
General, you mentioned the command positions you were in, and you were moving up the chain of command this whole time. By 2010, you were the combined. General, you mentioned the command positions you were in, and you were moving up the chain of command this whole time. By 2010, you were the combined Joint Operations Task Force commander and then commander of the Joint Special Operations component in Afghanistan. Briefly describe what you were responsible for in those roles and some of the decisions you were part of.
Sure. So I was responsible for all special operation forces minus our tier 1, right? Our JSOC counterterrorism mission folks, right? And so the lion's share of the special operation forces were guys that were doing the bottom-up mission all over Afghanistan, 90 different locations, right, in Afghanistan. And they were doing phenomenal work. Because it wasn't us doing the work, it was the Afghans. They had the will, they owned the problem, they lived in their villages, they walked to work, they were trained there, they knew how to defend their villages, they wanted to defend their families and their livelihoods, and they did it. And they never lost a fight against the Taliban, never. While the National Army and the police routinely lost fights without our help, significant help with air cover and such. So we knew this in 2013, and we went ahead and did it anyways. And the assessments for the National Army hadn't changed. I mean, I have former subordinates that went back again and again and again after I went to Africa. And then they came to work for me in Africa. On deployments in Africa, and I would talk to them about what was going on and what their observations were. And the policy and strategy at the end of the day didn't warrant another body bag or hospital bed with an American service member in it. And so I became, an advocate for getting out. That wasn't received well. I became an advocate for our service members that had post-traumatic stress. And, so there's a New York Times article out there on me as a general coming forward and saying, hey, I have post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and talking about the challenges in my personal and professional life with those things, and coming up with a program that helped my command, the people that I worked for, get treated for that, because the military's approach to this day is not a good approach. That wasn't received well. And then you get to Africa and you got 28 countries that are just like Afghanistan, and the policy there is broken, right? And so it's like the guys can see it, they're telling us, and then we're doing nothing about it. I said, that's not what generals are supposed to do. We're supposed to work for these guys and fix these problems, make sure they have everything they need to do the mission, buy down the risk of an already high risk environment, and then give them top cover. Just don't see that being done.
General, real quickly on Africa and that command opportunity, you were there at a time of certainly terrorist threats emanating from Somalia. Libya was obviously a mess. Boko Haram was thriving during this time. What were your biggest priorities there?
So the biggest priorities that we had there was to stop doing the work for them and getting them to be more competent at dealing with the ungoverned spaces. And this meant changing from a country to country focus and bringing the countries in to help each other in a regional type view. So you mentioned Boko Haram. Well, Boko Haram is in northern Nigeria. So is ISIS West Africa, right? They saw an opportunity to join, so they did. But Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and Burkina Faso are all negatively affected by what's going on in Nigeria. So you develop an inside-out plan for Nigeria and a outside-in plan for those other countries, and they start helping each other, right? And they start working the problem. And we were doing this in Somalia, we were doing this in Northern Africa, we were doing this across the Sahel. We had a great plan for Mali, which fell through the cracks, unfortunately. And so we were doing these, going from country to country, but plans and transitioning it to regional plans, right? The old Cold War idea of a diplomatic approach or a military approach to solving problems is gone. It's about the regions, and it's about getting that synergy, not only for our own national security, but our allies and our partners, right? Remember, the French believe that Mali is the front line on the war on terrorism, right? And up north, the Italians and the Brits, and they think it's northern Africa. So guess what? If that's their priority, we got to help them with that priority. And our policies and our strategies were just not doing that. So big priority, get people to think regionally. Second priority, get our partners to do it. And the third priority was to reorganize how we were doing the training, the advising and the assisting and the accompanying so they could be more effective themselves. And we use those three priorities to organize ourselves in time and space across an area 2.5 times the size of the United States with 1/3 of the resources that we needed in order to be able to do the job, right? We had 96 mission sets and 846 associated tasks. All right, that's a big lift in 28 different countries with 2,000 personnel across a geographical area 2.5 times the size of the United States. That's pretty damn big. And a $250 million budget, which was half of what we needed. You got to make it work. But the only way you make it work is by listening to people on the ground and not letting the guys at the top run everything, right? And then if they say no, it's a no-go, right? Pushing someone to do a mission that they're not trained for, they're not equipped for, they're not resourced for, and then putting them in a no-win situation that just elevates the risk from manageable to reckless, bad idea.
We're speaking with retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc. And sir, as you mentioned, you retired in 2017 after all of those commands and again 10 tours in Afghanistan. Now 4 years later, as we record this in early September 2021, the U.S. withdrawal becomes a major crisis over these past several weeks. And what has it been like for you and your friends in Special Forces and other veterans to watch the Taliban roll back into power after everything that you did there?
Well, it's been hard to watch. A lot of veterans I've been doing reach outs with, we've been reaching out to each other. We've been talking with each other to include guys that are on active duty and how they feel. And then trying to get our partners out when the military and the State Department fell short, right? And we still have guys on the ground doing that, still sending messages to my Afghan friends to get to certain locations based off of information that I get and what you need when you get there and who to contact when you get there to try and get them out. These things are still going on, and they're going to go on until we get the last person out. This should have been clearly the mission of our military and the mission of the United States government. And as you can see, it's not. That is not good for America. Our character, our integrity, our values, our principles, what we stand for. And I'm hearing from guys in other parts of the world on the ground being told by people they're working with that you can't trust America, right? And that puts everybody in danger. And that's not the America I know. And that's not the American other people know. And so we can't let this stand. And after the 13 killed and the 22 injured and the countless Afghans that were killed because of some misplaced allegiance to the Taliban, Al Qaeda, and ISIS there, come on. This was a disaster at the highest levels of our government, starting with the president, going over to the State Department, and then over to the Pentagon. I give them no leniency, particularly in the Pentagon. Not one general officer at any level threw their rank on the table and said, this is not right. We are putting our people in unnecessary danger, reckless, and until you give me what I need, we can't do this mission. That should have been what the Secretary of Defense said, Lloyd Austin. And if they set it behind closed doors, okay, great. You should have set it behind closed doors. But then you should have said it when the doors opened, because the way we employed our military in this and the way we conducted this operation, it's a disgrace to America. It really is. Now, not the service members, the way the senior people handled this. And now they're all over the news patting themselves on the back. No, not in my world, right? This is wrong, and they shouldn't have done it this way. I was for getting out of Afghanistan, but not this way. I figured, they'd have a sloppy policy and strategy to get out, but I didn't figure that it would be an unmitigated disaster, right? And that they would throw out all kinds of common sense and principles to do this stuff. I don't think there's anything in the history of the military in the world that can compare to how bad this was. Not even Dunkirk, right? And Dunkirk was bad. This is terrible. At least Winston Churchill didn't lose faith, right? At least he didn't give in to the enemy. He saved his military to fight another day, and then he went back and kicked their butts, right? So the message that we've sent out in the geopolitical environment is bad. It's bad for Taiwan. It's bad for anybody that put their trust. Look, our president was censured by the British Parliament. They didn't even censure us after they lost the Revolutionary War, right? First time that's happened in our history. And that's a good ally. That's one of our best in Europe. The Australians, they're worried about China. I don't blame them. Taiwan, people aren't trusting us. They're not even letting us use their bases. They don't even want us around. I mean, this is terrible, and it needs to be fixed. And unfortunately, we're not going to fix it with the people that we have in place, because I'm afraid the ones that stand behind them are just as bad. General McKenzie, CENTCOM commander, I can't believe some of the things he said. If this was his plan, his operational level plan, terrible. They all need to resign.
General, we talked earlier about your rise in rank and command opportunities and the leadership that required. As a commander, what would you have done differently, whether it's years before, like you were talking about how the Afghan strategy changed around 2013, 2014, whether it's months before as this framework of a deal with the Taliban got put together, or just in recent weeks when everything rapidly deteriorated? What would have been done differently? What should have been done differently in these final weeks for sure?
Well, if I was a general officer and I was involved in this planning, right, meaning part of the CENTCOM in the Pentagon, I would have come out publicly. I did it. I did it on active duty in 3 different occasions. My career became less important than helping my organization and working for the people in that organization than it did having some false sense of loyalty to the guys above me so I could get promoted, right? I would have come out and I would have said, hey, enough. Lieutenant Colonel Scheller comes out and he gets relieved, right? And I thought what he did was honorable. If he was my guy, I'd have put my arm around him and said, hey, why didn't you come to me with this, right? You didn't have to do a YouTube thing, but now that you've done it. It's all good. That's a clarion call. We don't have people rushing to go in the Army, right? This doesn't instill confidence in anybody. And I'll tell you what, I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I go to all kinds of functions. This past Friday, 2 Vietnam veterans come up to me who are grandfathers, and they love their country, and they served 2 tours, 101st Airborne Division, Hamburger Hill, the whole 9 yards, Silver Stars, blah, blah, blah. They don't want their grandchildren going in the military, not under this leadership. And that's terrible. That's not the military I've worked so hard to bring to the top of our nation's respect, right? From 1981 to 2017, we've worked so hard, all of us. And the military has been America's #1 trusted institution in our country. And now, look what these guys have done to it. But it's been a long time coming, because the days of selecting officers along the George Catlett Marshall method, long gone. Started after Korea into the Vietnam War, kind of changed things, and the top became this club and this organizational nepotism and go along to move along. When you make general and they shake your hand and they say, welcome to the club, I didn't know what that meant. And then when I found out what it meant, I didn't like it. It's not a club. Every time they want to fix something in the military, they're always looking down. And I'm saying, no, we got to look at ourselves. We got to look at ourselves in the mirror. And you can see it in investigations that have gone bad, blaming the subordinates, protecting the generals, or protecting those that we want to make generals at the expense of our guys on the ground. And, people need to read the book Sacrifice by Michelle Black, one of the wives that lost her husband in the Niger ambush, which was completely avoidable if the generals were dialed in and did their job. But they didn't. But who did they blame? Guys on the ground. And then they tried to protect their little precious guys at the higher ranks, and that's just wrong. And that's where we are today. In Afghanistan, this is a classic example of it. We have reached it, right? We have reached the point where now it's visible to the American people that we have a leadership problem across our government, whether it's at the executive, whether it's over at, our president, or in his advisors that are all around him, and the State Department, and in the Department of Defense. Today they say, oh, we're going to do after action reports. That's baloney. They should have said, we made mistakes. We made big mistakes, and it cost 13 people their lives, and 22. We put people in impossible positions. We left Americans on the ground, disgraceful. We left Afghan partners that we made promises to on the ground, disgraceful. We put our trust in our enemy, disgraceful. I'm going to the United States Senate to serve people and to make a difference and to hold people accountable for not doing their jobs. And that's what we need. We don't need career politicians and the same old status quo. This country is on the wrong road right now. We need to get it on the right road.
As General Bolduc just mentioned, he is a candidate for the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate in New Hampshire for the 2022 cycle, so we'll certainly be following that. And, sir, after such a distinguished career, I hate to end on such a down note from what we've seen here in the last few weeks and months. So as we exit here from your 36-plus years in uniform, what are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of the men and women that I served with and the work that they did. It didn't matter what we asked them to do, and maybe how we put them in positions sometimes that made it more difficult. The fact that they served with honor, they sacrificed, and they did everything that they were asked to do. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the people. I'm proud of this country and what it stands for, and what I saw it stood for in many, many other places in this world. And we cannot forsake that. So I'm proud of the men and women I had the opportunity to serve with. And I would do it again in a heartbeat just to be with them.
General, it's, like we said, a difficult end to the conversation about your remarkable record of service, but your devotion to those you served with and the nation that you served is quite inspiring. Thank you, sir, very much for your time today as well. We truly appreciate it.
My honor, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc, who served 10 tours in Afghanistan and is one of the famed horse soldiers, also from Afghanistan. I'm Greg Corombos. This is Veterans Chronicles. Hi, this is Greg Corombos, and thanks for listening to Veterans Chronicles, a presentation of the American Veterans Center. For more information, please visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org. You can also follow the American Veterans Center on Facebook, and on Twitter, we're at AVC Update. Subscribe to the American Veterans Center YouTube channel for full oral histories and special features, and of course, please subscribe to the Veterans Chronicles podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and please join us next time for Veterans Chronicles.